Welcome back to another episode of Brotherly Love in the District. Tristan here, along with Jacob, for our holiday episode. And Jacob, you want to go ahead and tell them what we're going to get into?
So I'm going to be talking about the past few weeks of football. We missed a week, so I'm going to be catching up on that. And going on to the NHL, the Capitals are really starting to get hot, so I want to be talking about that. And the Flyers continue to suck, so let's get right into it.
So as you guys could probably notice, we missed last week, and I'll explain like we did on our weekly predictions. We had a little bit of technical difficulties on the only day that we could record, so we both ended up having to go out of town, so we couldn't really get that recording done. So this is our makeup episode for the past couple of weeks. So also our holiday episode. So Merry happy holidays if you guys celebrate those, and going into into our new year. So if you guys are listening to this in the new year, happy 2023. That sounds weird to say, but continuing on into our episode, we'll start out just real quick. We're going to review the games from a couple weeks ago, as they didn't really have huge implications, more so for Washington than they did for the Eagles. But just talking real quick about the Eagles-Bears game. Eagles end up pulling off a 25-20 win over the Bears. And the biggest thing that happened in this game was Jalen Hurts gets taken down rough on his shoulder, and that ends up taking him out for the upcoming game that happened in the Dallas game, and potentially what looks like to be out for this next game coming up too against the Saints. But we're going to talk a little bit more about that as it comes up. But Eagles play a sloppy game, that is for sure. I think the cold played a big factor, as the ball was way harder than it normally is. The wind makes it that much worse, and Chicago's stadium is right on the water, so a little bit windier than it normally is in Chicago. So they played a sloppy game. They end up getting the win though, and it put them one game closer to locking up the NFC East, which is something they look to do against Dallas. But we'll talk about what happened there. Talking a little bit more about what happened with the Washington game, is that was an implication for, that's a little bit of an implication for you guys, playoff implication.
Just a disgusting game, frankly. We had 2 weeks to prepare, and we looked unprepared. Our offense, again, we can't get it done in clutch times like third down. We can run the ball, but Heineke, it just seems like on a few throws he really struggles, and we've seen that. And it was just a very disappointing game, because I still feel the Giants are a team we can beat, but we didn't do it at all this season. So yeah, an overall very disappointing game. We had 2 weeks to prepare, but we still came out in the first half looking completely unprepared.
And I mean, that kind of started your guys' downfall. Is we'll just go right on into this next week. You guys lose that game, takes you on into San Fran. Now, don't get me wrong, San Fran is not a opponent to scoff at, but that kind of started your downfall, as you're now on a 2-game losing streak, looking to end that going into your third game here.
Yeah, in this Chiefs game, or 49ers game, it was rough. Heineke didn't really play that well at all. He played decent, but there was a few moments where it really showed that he's going to be a career backup for a reason. He was 13 for 18, but those 4 or 5 throws he missed, he should have been able to easily complete. He threw a bad interception. And understand that I think some of it is down to our pass protection being pretty awful, frankly. We can still run the ball, not against the Niners, because they were just able to shut down a run game, but yeah, our pass rush especially is pretty bad. And then Carson Wentz got it, and he did decent for what he had, 12 for 16, 123, 1 touchdown, but we were so far behind it didn't really make a difference. And our defense, it really couldn't do a lot. Frankly, Brock Purdy, 15 for 22, 234, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. We did an okay job of limiting run to a certain extent. Ray McLeod had 1 carry for 71 yards and a touchdown. But we were able to limit McCaffrey to 15 for 46 and a touchdown, so that's a positive. It kind of shows that our strength still is in our run defense. It was like that last year, but they were just able to pass all over us. Especially George Kittle gave us nightmares: 6 receptions, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns, and yeah, just an overall bad game, and it puts very big emphasis on this Cleveland game because if we lose this, I personally think it's going to be impossible for us to make it in the playoffs. I don't know how it would work out, like in terms of math and all that.
You guys have 7 wins, right?
Yeah.
So theoretically, you guys would still be in better shape than like. So I believe, I'm just going off the top of my head. I don't know off. Actually, I could pull up the standings here real quick. But yeah.
We're
So
still in the wild card spot.
so you guys could still potentially land a wild card spot because the teams who are still fighting in the hunt are the Seahawks, Detroit, Green Bay, and that's really the only teams who could get in the hunt.
Yeah.
They're all 7-8. You're 7-7-1, so that tie actually helps you. So whether you guys win or not, that's gonna kind of that's not gonna be as much of winning will help you a ton, but losing won't really kill you a ton because Green Bay still has to play Detroit. So theoretically, just say Green Bay wins this week, loses next week. Then and Detroit loses this week, and then they would beat Green Bay next week. I think you end up getting into the playoffs because as long as you win, because you have that tie. So the tie helps a lot. New York is also in the mix. San Fran already locked in their spot, and then
I think New York has pretty much locked in their spot. I personally think that. I just think they need one more.
If they get one more win, I think they're clinched.
Yeah, I believe so, but I understand it's mathematically possible if we lose, but I still think
it's going to be hard. Yeah.
We need a win here. We need to keep our destiny in our own hands. We can't put our destiny in other teams' hands, kind of like what happened with the Giants in 2020 when the Eagles kind of threw that game, frankly.
Hey, why try to hurt our starters?
Yeah, but you can't really complain if your own destiny is in other teams' hands. You don't really have anything to stand on, frankly. So yeah, I think this game against Cleveland, it's a must-win. And I honestly, it'll probably decide Rivera's job, frankly, because if we win and get into playoffs, I can see him coming back next year. But if he doesn't, then I can see them moving on because I feel like we're at that tipping point.
And I said this in our predictions. I'll say it again, just for the people in the back. This is like I said, you can't hide your quarterback. You have a team that shuts down your run like San Fran. You then start to expose a quarterback who isn't an NFL quarterback, and that's where you face troubles. I think Carson Wentz coming in is huge for you guys because, I mean, he can pass the ball a little bit better. Not that he's...
A little bit?
I was going to say, not that he's great. Like, he's still struggling to be a starter in the NFL, but he's a lot closer to a starter in the NFL than Taylor Heineke. Like I said, you can't hide that quarterback all the way through the playoffs.
It'll be interesting to see how things work out because we have a healthy wide receiver core and we have a run game. And Carson Wentz didn't have that early in the season, but our pass protection still stinks. So it should be interesting to see how that works out. And I think Carson Wentz should come out with flamelit under his butt because this could possibly be his last chance. Because say he comes out, he does very good against the Cleveland Browns, and next week he does good against Dallas, then I think there's possible, like, he could possibly be brought back to us or another team. But if he doesn't, then I think it'll be very difficult for him to get another starting opportunity.
Yeah, he'd just be a career backup like Taylor Heineke. Yeah. A better career backup, but still like Taylor Heineke. But yeah, and George Kittle, matchup nightmare. I can't really blame you for letting him run all over the place. But going to the Eagles game, as I don't really have anything else to mention on the Commanders game. Anything else from you?
No.
Going over to the Eagles game, which in my opinion was a lot more interesting of a game. I don't know how much of the game you watched, being that Washington played at the exact same time. But
Yeah, I didn't watch any of that game.
I didn't think you got to see. But I'll tell you what, it lived up to the hype of it being your game of the week. It was an
Hmm.
insane game to watch. Uh, so I said I had a lot to go off of. There is a lot I wanted to mention. First off, we'll start with the defenses. Defenses played terribly. They were not great in any facet of the game. Uh, Lots of offensive production, bits and pieces of mistakes here and there from both offenses, which led to defensive turnovers, but ultimately the defenses did nothing. Now, with that being said, the Eagles' defense is one of only two teams to have six or more sacks in four straight games, which I say that, but the Eagles' sacks that they had this week, I'm going to be honest, I thought the Eagles had two when we came out of that game. They did not look like they played like they got to Dak at all. Uh, so there was some struggle there, but I mean, they got six sacks. They just weren't detrimental sacks, if that makes sense. And then
Yeah,
also that I don't know. I don't know if maybe you saw it on Instagram or what, but did you see that T.Y. Hilton bomb?
I did.
That was so eh, maddening to watch. I mean, all Dak Prescott did was drop back and just chuck it as far as he could. Now, I'm not an NFL defensive coordinator. I don't know what defense was called. I kind of wish I could see the all 22, but it almost looked like they were playing a zone, which Dak Prescott was 24 for 24 against the Eagles zone defense.
Yeah.
But uh, it almost looked like they were playing a zone because it kind of looked like Darius Slay was following them, and then they got to like 15, 20 yards out, and then he just kind of stopped and waited.
Maybe he expected a safety to be there because
Josiah Scott was supposed to be there too. That was
that's
another
the
big
only
piece of it.
reason I can think Darius Slay would just drop out of that route.
Yeah,
That's the only reason I think that would happen.
Josiah Scott was late, and he was supposed to be there, which that was ultimately the play of the game. If looking back at it, that was the play of the game. It was 3rd and 30 essentially. I don't
Yeah.
remember the exact distance, but it was about 3rd and 30, and they had essentially no chance. There was 6 minutes left. We were up by a touchdown. If they don't score, if they don't get that bomb, the Eagles are winning the game. They're getting that ball back. They're running the clock. It's a lot easier for them. But with that bomb, that led to another opening of a drive. Essentially, it just opened a new drive for them, and they were able to go down and score, and that tied the game back up. But I think the big pieces on the defense that ultimately hurt was the loss of Avante Maddox. There's no sign as when he's going to be back. He's out indefinitely with a toe, but I mean, you see where when Avante Maddox went out, CeeDee Lamb had a great game. CeeDee Lamb wasn't doing much before. Avante Maddox had a phenomenal game until he got hurt. He was all over the place. Seemed like they were calling his name on every play, but once he went out, that really changed the perspective of the defense. You take a guy in Josiah Scott who never hasn't started in the NFL, and you can see why he hasn't. He was. It's not that he wasn't exactly in the right places. It was just he wasn't able to read as well as Avante Maddox was. And then, like I said, the zone coverage. Now, I saw something saying that Jonathan Gannon might have been running more zone to not expose what he will run in the playoffs, which that could either be a really smart move or a really dumb move. Because, say, hypothetically, Eagles lose out. I don't think they will. But, say, hypothetically, the Eagles lose out. Dallas wins out. Dallas wins the division. Now the Eagles are in a totally different spot. But, and he looks like a dummy for not putting out his best defense against the Cowboys. But,
Yeah.
say the Eagles win this game against the Saints or against the Giants, they clinch that first round bye. He looks like a genius because now maybe you have to play the Cowboys again. You bring out a totally different defense, Dak is going to be lost. So uh, he played a lot of zone, and I say all the time, you put out a semi decent, competent quarterback against a zone defense, and he will pick you apart.
They're going to eat it up,
I
especially like if they know what to look for, then it's very hard to get caught out by a zone.
Yeah, I think that he ate the zone up a lot, and Zone, I hated when Jim Schwartz ran zone constantly because it was always getting eaten alive. Because, I mean, you put a competent quarterback back there who can read a book, he's going to tear your zone apart. So he played really well against that. But yet again, Dak throws another pick. He's now, counting this Thursday night game that they just played, he's now up to 14 picks, which is tied for most in the league. And he's played 5 less games than Derek Carr, who's tied for most
Yeah.
interceptions with him. Dak is, he's, I don't know if it's just because he's being a risk taker, if he's having trouble reading something. I don't know what it is, but he's throwing a lot of picks. And come playoff time, that's going to hurt him, in my opinion.
I think it possibly could be down to the offensive scheming because he just lost one of his biggest targets and Amari Cooper. So maybe they're still trying to work things out and they're trying to be a little more like explosive in their offense. But I don't know what the reason for the picks is. But going into my 2 cents about this game, I had two big takeaways from this game. One's positive, one's negative. I'll start with the negative. Your defense come playoff time simply cannot play like that. There's no other way of saying that. The Cowboys were able to move the ball up and down the field. They had 419 total yards on you guys, and that's just come playoff time. That's not going to be good enough. Now, going on to the positive, your offense is still looking incredible considering you had a backup in and at quarterback, so that is very positive. So I think that shows that your offense is going to be able to it's going to be able to play like that.
Be consistent.
Again. Yeah.
And I will.
But one big thing is Lane Johnson being out with an ab muscle. I don't think he's going to be back come playoff time.
They think he'll be back by playoff time. He's putting off his surgery so that he can be back for playoff time.
He might be back, but I think will he be 100% considering I think you're going to be using your abs a lot, especially when you're sumo wrestling every single play, pretty much. I think that could play a part, but I think this was a game where we saw a lot of positives from the Eagles, but we also saw a lot of negatives. And for the Eagles' offenses, you were able to do really good against the Cowboys' defense, who have been pretty well, and even though you did throw 2 picks, they weren't able to get a defensive touchdown off of you guys.
I will say a couple things off of yours. First off, the negative. The defense didn't look normal, so I'm interested to see what happens there. But you're right, their defense can't play like that, otherwise they will lose games. Second thing, going on to the offense, because I wanted to talk more about the offensive side of the ball. Yes, the offense played really well. I think everyone on that football field played their heart out. I think they played a really good game overall. Gardner Minshew had a really good game. He went 24 for 40 with 350 yards, I believe.
355.
Yeah, so he had 350 yards. I don't think the 2 interceptions were entirely his fault. They could have been placed in a better spot, but Quez Watkins cannot get wrestled off of the ball twice. Both those interceptions were wrestled off of Quez Watkins. So the ball placement could have been better, but it was a 50-50 downfall for both parties in that pass and catch there. So the 2 interceptions weren't entirely his fault, but Quez Watkins has got to get that ball back. The fumble at the end of the game by Miles Sanders, absolutely detrimental too. You got to make sure you hold on to the ball there. But I mean, aside from that, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith both had 100-yard games. They're now the only Eagles wide receiver duo to both have over 1,000 yards. First receivers to get 1,000 yards since Jeremy Maclin in 2014. You see how potent the offense is with now 2 1,000-yard receivers and a 1,000-yard rusher in Miles Sanders. And if Dallas Goedert hadn't gotten hurt, I think he also probably would have had 1,000 yards. So very potent offense. But like you said, they can play well without Jalen Hurts. But I think Jalen Hurts missing, despite the offense playing well, Jalen Hurts missing, I think made it a lot easier for the Cowboys defense too, because without Jalen Hurts, they know that the zone read is not going to be kept by Gardner Minshew. He is not a running quarterback like Jalen Hurts is, which means you can be one-dimensional on Miles Sanders. When the Eagles and the Cowboys played earlier in the season, they did they made Micah Parsons the read guy on the read option. So for anyone who doesn't know, on a read option, the quarterback's sitting there holding the ball, and he's looking at a defensive end, a linebacker, whoever's on that edge to decide whether he's going to give that ball. If that end crashes in on the running back, he keeps it, runs around the outside. If he stays, then he gives it to the running back. When you take away that running aspect from the quarterback, that makes the zone read not a zone read. It's just an inside zone at that point, which makes it to the point where the end can crash every single time and takes away the running ability for the running back. So Miles Sanders wasn't exactly in a good spot to have a great game either. So they weren't able to make Micah Parsons the read man like they were in the first game. Jalen Hurts being out was a huge piece to this loss. Don't get me wrong, they could have won and they should have won without him, but him being gone was also a huge piece of the loss. And on one last thing on that Lane Johnson thing, even if he's hurt, Jack Driscoll, I am not scared with Jack Driscoll starting a little bit. He plays well. He's a good right tackle. He's a good sub. We have yet to see him in an extensive starting role, but from what I've seen from him so far, and the fact that he's being coached by Jeff Stoutland, I think he can do a pretty good job for the next 2 games to just hope that Lane Johnson gets back here for the playoffs. That ultimately ends that past week. And now the Eagles have to try to win this week against the Saints, which we will go into now because that's really all from last week, unless you have anything else to add in.
That's all I got.
Yeah, so going on to this week, Eagles play the Saints. Looks like Gardner Minshew is going to be starting again. Jalen Hurts is doubtful. I honestly don't want them to play him because I would rather him just sit, rest his shoulder for the playoffs. I think at this rate, if you win this week with Gardner Minshew, you can rest him again next week against the Giants where you don't really have to play your starters because you clinch all of the NFC bye week, the NFC East, all that stuff. So I think if you win this week with Gardner Minshew, you give Jalen Hurts that extra 2 weeks of rest for his shoulder because obviously they don't entirely know what's wrong. That's huge for Jalen Hurts. Give him all the rest he can get. So I think they can win. The Saints are not a very good team. They have some good pieces on defense. Tyrann Mathieu, Cam Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore, all former Pro Bowlers. But, I mean, there's only so far you can go with 3 good players. I mean, it takes an entire team. So Eagles should be able to win this one handily.
Yeah, even without Jalen Hurts, I think you guys have shown that your offense especially is good enough, like significantly good enough to be able to beat the Saints who have struggled this season, even though they do have a good defense. I just can't see the Saints keeping up with you guys, and I think you'll clinch the division this week.
Oh, and DeMario Davis. He is also a beast. And you know who needs to get involved more? Dallas Goedert. If Dallas Goedert gets involved more, that's huge, which I'm surprised he didn't get involved more because Gardner Minshew loved him last season when he started against the Jets. But if Dallas Goedert gets involved more, definitely a win. Going on to the Commanders versus the Browns. 2 big playoff implication games for both teams this week.
Yeah, simply, I said this on our predictions video. It's a must-win game. Even though it's possible, you gotta win it. And I do think it's very possible, and we should win it because if we look at the Browns, they have struggled really to get going offensively. Outside of Nick Chubb, they don't really have a lot. Deshaun Watson has struggled in his return. They just can't find it. And going on into our team, defensively, if we're able to limit Nick Chubb, I think we have a significantly good chance, and I think that's possible considering we actually did pretty good against McCaffrey last week. The Niners did bust out that huge run with McLeod against us, but if we're able to limit that and Carson Wentz we're able to get the run game going, we're able to give him enough time to throw the ball, this is a game we should win pretty handily, I think.
I said earlier, if you can hold down Elijah Mitchell and Christian McCaffrey, because When you said Ray McLeod led the team in rushing with that 71-yard outburst, that means no other running back had more than 70 yards, which is huge.
Hmm.
So if you can hold those two down because they're very elusive, very explosive backs, that's huge. And if you can do that to the Browns, then you should be able to win because, like you said, Sean Watson's kind of struggling in his return. He's not exactly quite fluid with his receivers yet. I think next year they could be a dangerous team, but this year they have nothing going for them. But another thing is Nick Chubb, though, he is not the same type of back. Nick Chubb is a downhill bruiser, a very hard 10-yard runner, whereas Christian McCaffrey is a kind of like elusive and then get into the open space and go. So Nick Chubb, it's a different back, but it's the running game nonetheless. So if you can
But we
shut down the
did,
running
but
game,
I do think we have the personnel to shut that down because we have Payne and Allen in the middle, who are two of the best defensive tackles in the league. And you have um, Chase Young and Montez Sweat coming off the edge, and credit to Jamin Davis, he's actually really stepped up his game this year. So I think we have the personnel to shut them down, even though we had a pretty awful game defensively last week. I think we have the personnel, and I think we just have the team to be able to shut them down and win.
I think you guys should be able to win, which is huge for you guys because you need a win here. Uh, Anything else from you?
That's all I got for
I
football.
I wanted to go through the Pro Bowl rosters, which
Oh yes, yes,
not
yes.
not exactly huge, but obviously there's still some snubs and stuff, and some stuff you want to talk about before you
I do have a few
going
things
into
on
it.
it.
So I'll let you go over Washington's because Washington had a lot less Pro Bowlers than the Eagles.
Yeah, whatever. So our we have three starters. Jonathan Allen's a starter. Tress Way's a starter, and this is the big one. In terms of media attention, it got Jeremy Reeves, who has been he's been on our preseason roster, um, like for the past few years now, and he kept getting cut, and this is his first team or first year with the team. He's the special teams guy, and if you saw the video when Ron Rivera told him, he started crying, and just a great video. So that's really cool to see that in his first year, and he definitely deserves it. He's the special team starter. Tress Way, he's been the best punter in the league this year. Jonathan Allen, obviously top 5 defensive tackle. Terry McLaurin is a reserve. Deron Payne, first alternate, and Montez Sweat, second alternate. So pretty cool to see some of those votes.
For the Eagles Pro Bowlers, Jalen Hurts, obviously at quarterback, MVP candidate. Miles Sanders made it. A.J. Brown, Lane Johnson, Landon Dickerson, Jason Kelsey, Hassan Reddick, and Darius Slay. I mean, all quite deserving in my opinion. Maybe Landon Dickerson is a little iffy, uh, but Darius Slay, I think James Bradbury should have been a starter, and maybe
Over who
Devontae.
though?
Who's the other cornerback? Trayvon Diggs, and who's the other one?
Uh,
I can't think of who it is.
Give me a minute.
But I mean, James Bradbury and Darius Slay are the most elite starting cornerback duo in the
Darius
league right
Slay,
now.
Trayvon Diggs, Tariq Wooden, and Jair Alexander.
Jair Alexander should not be in there. Over James Bradbury, no way. That's in my opinion. I think. Don't get me wrong. Pro Bowl is definitely a popularity contest.
It
Is
is.
Jair Alexander a good player? Yes, but is he a Pro Bowl starter over James Bradbury, who has double-digit pass breakups and north of 3 interceptions this season? No. So I mean that's in my opinion, but the I think that's the only thing. I also heard that Landon Dickerson probably shouldn't be a starter. I would agree there. I think he's had a good season, but he's not exactly a standout guy in my opinion. So I am okay with that. And then I also think that Josh Sweat should have been a starter. He made it as an alternate, but I think he should have been a starter. He is arguably one of the best defensive ends in the league this season. He's very under the radar. He is a top 20 player, probably. Top 20 defenseman, defensive lineman, top 5 defensive end in the league right now. Top 5 player for the Eagles right now. I mean, he had that pick 6 against the Cowboys. He's got double-digit sacks. He's had a really good season, and for someone who thought they weren't going to have he wasn't going to have an NFL career, he's playing really well. Uh, and then I'm going to pull up the alternates real quick because I don't. Devontae Smith is an alternate, Jordan Mailata, Isaac Sayamalu, Javon Hargrave, Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, Josh Sweat, James Bradbury, and I think that is it. Eagles altogether had 17. Oh, and Rick Lovato. Eagles altogether, all said and done, 17 Pro Bowlers with the alternates. Last thing just to mention before we move on to the NHL, CJ Gardner-Johnson eligible to come off IR this week. Does that mean he's going to come off? Not entirely, but
I don't think he should anyway.
it all depends on how big the laceration in his kidney is at this point. It's all about the healing process. I mean, they weren't going to put him on IR to begin with, so it can't be that bad. But again, I'm at the point where you've been making do without him, and if you can give him those extra couple weeks of rest to make sure you have him in the playoffs, do so. So
Yeah, 'cause playoffs are way more important because you're guaranteed to get there no matter if you play him or not. So I just think you need to give him the proper resting time.
exactly. That's the last thing I had to mention for the NFL. Is that anything else from you?
So I got for the NFL.
All right. I'm just going to go through the Flyers real quick because there's not much to talk about. They are still one of the worst teams in the NHL. They still don't play great. They still are one of the worst scoring teams in the NHL. But they have finally won their first game in overtime this season. They have now won one of the last 10 overtime games going to last season now. They were 0-9 until last night. They beat the Sharks. First time I can wear this hat and be somewhat happy about it. But they finally won. They beat the Sharks last night after being down 3-1 in the third. Came back, took it into overtime, won 4-3. But the only thing I really want to mention is they're keeping games close. They have at the 5-minute mark of the third period, like 5 minutes left in the game, in their past 12 games, they've been within one goal. And it's just they can't finish games. That's their biggest problem, is not being able to finish games. But they finally did it yesterday. And then, another big thing. Carter Hart got down to IR. He took a hit off of Jesper Bratt against the Devils a couple days ago. He took a hit to the side of the head, so he's going to be out for a little bit on IR. And they now have to go with Felix Sandstrom and Sam Urson. So bringing up more young guys to play at goalie, and hopefully they can just hold down the fort a little bit. They obviously don't have to do too much. They don't have to worry about people scoring in front of them. It's just try not to lose every single game and just win a couple here and there and don't let pucks through. But ultimately, it's NHL experience. I mean, you can't really complain about that. Sam Urson earned his first win yesterday, made a couple amazing saves, but ultimately, it's the same old in Philadelphia. Players, Travis Konechny having a great season, Owen Tippett having a great season, and they're just looking to focus on who's going to be in the lineup next season. But Caps, on the other hand, actually their win streak just ended, but they're streaking right now still.
It was like 10 or 11 wins in a row or something like that, but we're 8-1-1 in the last 10. We're up to third in the Metro. We're a point behind the Devils, who are really starting to fall off. They're 2-7-1 in their last 10. Ovi recently just passed Gordie Howe with his 802nd or third goal. So yeah, that's just awesome to see. There's one more left, and I think we're going to see in 2 or 3 years, see him passing it. And I was maybe a little bit wrong about the Caps early in the season. They obviously found something again, and it seems like it was a very Caps thing to do. to look like crap and think this is the year that they'll blow it up, but then they'll start to find something. But for me, the three biggest pieces of this real win streak is Ovechkin, who's now past a point per game now in 38 games. He has 42 points, 23 goals, 19 assists. And our goaltending, I think, has been a huge factor in this team. We're the only team in the NHL to have two goaltenders with above 10 wins at this point. And I think that's really helped us get a lot of wins. So Charlie Lindgren, our backup, is 10-4 with a 913 save percentage, and for a backup goaltender, that's pretty good. That's that's what you ask from your backup. And Darcy Kemper is 10-9 with a 920 save percentage, and that's better than I expected from him, because I said like for us to be successful, all we really needed from him was in the 19s, and he's up to 920. So good for him.
And I mean, when you have not exactly a 1A, 1B situation, but the way that they've had their game share, it kind of seems like that. But I mean, that does help quite a bit because it takes stress off of the starting goalie. And I mean, I've said this before, Darcy Kemper, he's been the bright spot on a lot of weaker teams. When he played for Arizona, yeah, when he played for Arizona, like he wasn't the reason they sucked. The team was the reason they sucked. He played really good. I want to say
votes.
I want to say he's only had south of a 900 save percentage like twice in his career. Like he's a very under the radar guy. He's been really good. But when, like I said, I thought he was going to be different with Colorado's D-core is way better than Washington's D-core, but he's playing really well there, so that's helpful.
Last season he had a 921 save percentage, and this season he has a 920. I understand it's only 23 games versus he played 57 with the Avs, but I still think that's pretty good considering, like you said, our D-core is nowhere near the D-core that Colorado has.
Yeah, but that's huge for you guys, and you guys are definitely starting to catch a streak. And are you guys back in the playoffs yet? The playoff hunt?
Yeah, we're third in the Metro.
All right, so yeah, you guys are starting to catch back up. What'd you say was going on with New Jersey?
They're 2-7-1 in the last 10.
Where are they?
They're second, but they only have 46 points, and the middle group of the Metro is very close. The Devils have 46, we have 45. The Penguins, Islanders, and Rangers all have 44.
And I think the Flyers have like 29.
You have 31.
Oh, so let's go. That's more than I thought. Let's go. That's a win.
But I see this as an absolute win.
I see this as an absolute win. Yeah, pick the two pictures, one of a garbage bag and one of a Flyers logo. Tell the difference. Can't really tell.
Corporate asked us to find the difference between this.
They're the same picture. Yeah, I mean, as much as it sucks that the Flyers aren't performing this season, you weren't expecting much, so I can't complain. I'm okay with it. I was actually talking to my brother earlier, who's a Penguins fan, and I go, yeah, so Flyers finally won in overtime, and he goes, wow, they have sucked this season, and I go, tell me about it. I'm not really shocked, though. I go, they weren't really expected to win. He goes, they weren't expected to win. He goes, you're going into every season trying to win a cup. I go, yeah, but their roster, not really great. I mean, I'm not surprised.
I don't think I've ever met your brother, but I can already tell I'd find him annoying because
he's a Penguins fan.
Yep.
So we have this rink that the Capitals built, and the ground the floor of it isn't exactly ideal for skating on, but he'll come play and he'll slip, and then I'm like, well, you see who built it. But yeah, he hates the Capitals. I think he might start to. The Flyers, the Rangers, and the Capitals are definitely top 3 on his list. Caps and Flyers. I don't actually know. It probably depends on the day. It's rotatable.
I respect the Penguins because I think both Caps and Penguins fans at this point really. I mean, you respect the team, but we still hate each other. I still adamantly hate the Penguins for the amount of times they beat us in the playoffs when we had better teams, if we're looking at it objectively. But yeah, I just really don't like the Penguins.
There is nothing that I don't like the Penguins. They're cross-state rivals. Obviously, I can't stand them. I'm starting to not like the Islanders. They are slowly inching their
Starting
way up.
to, you've like hated them for like a few years now.
Yeah, them and the Mets. Oh, it
I
is.
still don't. I don't fully understand that, but I know
Oh,
it's you hate the colors and all that bull
it's
crap. But
just any. It's not. It's the color that it's associated with. It's not even like I just don't like blue and orange. It's just I don't like that it's associated with them. That's what it is. And speaking of the Mets, real quick, I think this is something we got to talk about. Carlos Correa pulled a Randy Gregory on the
oh
Giants.
yeah, because on
He was supposed to be signing with the Giants, and he turned around. Something happened. They didn't. They didn't. I
they
guess.
didn't like his physical, but
Yeah.
then the Mets they saw his physical too, and they're worried as well. So I don't know what's going on with Correa. I don't know if he's
I
still
think he's
officially
signed with the Mets. I think he's officially a Met.
I don't know, but there's something going on with that
So, yeah, I
that
mean it is.
physical.
So for context for anyone who isn't aware, Randy Gregory was going to agree to sign with the Cowboys again, and then he turned around and ended up signing with the Broncos. And that's the same thing Carlos Correa did. He was supposed to sign with the Giants. There was trouble with his physical health, and I think just actually his physical. They were looking into his health and they didn't like something, so I guess they hadn't fully signed the contract. And then he turned around and ended up signing with the Mets. I saw that and I was looking and I was like, "Whoa! I thought he was supposed to be a Giant."
I don't think it's official yet because he's not willing to restructure, and I still think there's questions over his physical. So I do not know what's going on there.
It's definitely something to look after, but it looks like he's going to be a New York Met come.
It looks that way, but I really don't know.
Which who's their other? They have who's their shortstop? Oh, Francisco Lindor.
Oh yeah,
Because I was trying to think because I know they had Javi Baez and Francisco Lindor, which means they're going to have to jumble those two up too.
Javi Baez plays for Detroit. Remember?
Yeah, but he was on the Mets. They
He
they
was.
traded for Francisco Lindor, and then they had both Javi Baez and Francisco Lindor.
But then Javi Baez sucked and went
Signed
to
with Detroit, exactly.
and he sucked with them too.
But with that, that's really all I got. Anything else from you?
That's all I got.
All right, so that is going to close it out for this week. Like we said, a little bit of technical difficulties, so that was an issue for this past week, but we came out, tried to make it up for the past couple of weeks, but we are going to post big news and signings and all that stuff on this side, BL in the DC, on Instagram and TikTok. If you guys want to send us questions or comments at blinthedc@gmail.com for that, and you guys can rate and review us on Apple and Spotify or wherever you guys get your podcasts. And we do weekly predictions every week on YouTube, and we also post a video version of this. So, Brotherly Love in the District on all that stuff. And with that, that's going to close it out for this week, and we will see you guys next week.
See you later.